Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome to part 1 of What If Deku Had Returned by Death. If you guys enjoyed this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. After watching this video, don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description down below. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Izuku sat back hunched, legs bent, and stared listlessly at a pile of firewood. He just deposited it into the masonry heater, and lips pursed in deliberation while he tapped a finger against his thigh. He reached out to the leftmost piece, picking it up before plopping it down in the middle. He paused for a moment. Then, with a brisk shake of his head, he snatched it back and threw it to the right. He glared. With a meticulous eye, he scooped all the pieces to the ground and started to rearrange them again from the beginning for the third time. It's all going to burn the same anyway. It's no big deal, he mumbled between pressed lips. With two motley-sized pieces in his hands, he scrutinized them firmly. Should he put the bigger ones in the middle and the smaller ones on the side? Or would an even surface be better? What about the small ones in the middle and the bigger ones beside it? He groaned. No. That's stupid. Dropping the blocks, he tried again. He worked with a keen and single-minded focus, when his interest was snagged by a pair of familiar boots creeping into view. Izuku paused in his ministrations, looking up to meet a pair of dual-colored eyes staring at him. He nodded in recognition. Todoroki. Midoriya. The newcomer pointedly glanced to the pile of wood by the furnace. Are you doing okay? Izuku followed his line of sight. Then, he looked to the few scattered blocks of wood he'd managed to file onto the brickwork of what was to be their cooking station. He shrugged. Yeah, I'm fine. Just trying to think of the best way to arrange this firewood. Oh, Todoroki nodded, though he did not look any less befuddled. Why? Izuku tapped some kindling against his knee. It was the same question he'd asked himself each time he scrapped his work only to build the fire again back from scratch. Something nagged at him in the back of his head, whispering that it was absolutely imperative that he got this right, or something terrible was sure to happen. Which was ridiculous of course, but knowing that didn't make the voice any easier to ignore or feel any less real. It's been too long since anything important happened. By this point, his nerves were wound so tight, he'd be relieved once the other shoe finally dropped. Ignoring the woodpile's taunts for now, he dropped the piece in his hand and planted both palms on his knees. So, Todoroki. What's up? Todoroki averted his gaze. Not much. I think. What about you? Same, Izuku nodded, very proud of his contribution to this riveting conversation. He glanced around. Hey, have you seen Koda around anywhere? Todoroki looked thrown by the jump in conversation, muttering a quick, who? Koda. That kid from earlier. You saw him when we first got here. Oh, yeah. I remember, Todoroki eyed their immediate surroundings before shrugging. I don't know. Did you need something with him? I'm sure Mandalay can help you. No. Not really, Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. I was just thinking that he must get bored here, no other kids his age, to play with and all. Just thought I'd check in, you know. Well, that and I. The conversation from yesterday had kept Izuku up for the better part of the night. The words the child threw at him must have gnawed on Koda for some time. Did he ever talk about his feelings with Mandalay? Or anyone, for that matter? Losing your parents is never easy, never mind losing them at such a young age. And the type of resentment Koda was showing. It's not the kind that goes away on its own. It just keeps growing. Even though I want to talk to Mandalay about it, I know it's not my place. I'm just a stranger after all. And I know for sure I wouldn't enjoy having people talk about my personal issues behind my back. Midoriya. Todoroki cut through his classmate's brooding when he called for Izuku's attention. Those mismatched eyes were focused on the other with a strange intensity, and not for the first time Izuku wished his classmate was easier to read. Forgive me if I'm misunderstanding something, but if you're trying to think of the right words to say to him to make him feel better, or whatever. That might be impossible, he started. There's not always a right combination of words that will automatically fix all of your problems. Out over that, before you help someone, that person must be willing to accept it in the first place. You can't force it. Izuku knit his brows together. You say might. So, you're also saying there might be a way. Yes, the other boy nodded. Even if your words do not reach them at the moment, it can be the starting point for change. Or it can be completely lost on them. The answer will only be known through time. What I'm trying to say is, not that you shouldn't try to help people, but rather, to not get your hopes up. Even if you give it your all and try your best, it won't always work out. And just because it doesn't work, it doesn't have to be through any fault of your own. Some things are just not meant to be. If we could all get what we wanted just by trying hard enough, the world wouldn't need heroes. So, keep trying but don't be disappointed if I fail. Yeah. Something like that. Todoroki gave an affirmative dip of his head. He looked unaccustomed to such long speeches, and was now fiddling with the sleeve of his shirt with a drained appearance. Wanting to reassure his classmates that all his effort weren't in vain, Izuku gave his most reassuring smile. I'll try to keep that in mind. Thank you, Todoroki. His friend, acquaintance, stiffly returned the gesture, though his posture did relax somewhat. He decided to leave Izuku to his business, wandering off to do whatever chores he'd been assigned before getting distracted by their conversation. Speaking of, why had he even approached Izuku in the first place? Had he really been that distracted by Izuku's self-imposed job of building the perfect fireplace? Come to think of it, even though I said all those things to him at the festival, we haven't really talked much outside of it. In fact, most of the time it's been Todoroki who'd approached me first. Oh? Izuku placed his face in his hands and groaned. He's been trying to befriend me this whole time, and I've just been brushing him off, haven't I? Well, maybe not brushing him off exactly. But considering all the emotions they went through together during the festival, you'd figured it would have built some kind of kinship between them. Perhaps it had for Todoroki, and Izuku was too busy worrying about other things to notice the other's subtle attempts to grow closer. It must have been awkward for him, not having much experience how things like friendships worked, and still trying hard to make one. Izuku could relate. Koch-chan was the only one from his childhood whom he'd called a friend, until he got to UA, and learned what the word actually meant with Iida and Uraraka. Izuku staved off the urge to smack his face into the bricks of the furnace. Well, it's never too late. Right. He nodded to himself. Next time he had lunch with his friends, he'd make sure to invite Todoroki as well. Now, there's only one thing left. Izuku looked at the pile of wood by his feet. Cupping his hands, he did his best to scoop up and balance the pieces together without dropping any. He threw them into the furnace. Perfect. Izuku looked from the number 8 in his hand to Bakugo and Todoroki scowling at each other. Or rather, Bakugo scowling whilst Todoroki looked as indifferent as always. Considering Izuku's earlier revelation, it was as if the universe just handed him the perfect opportunity to deepen the bond he promised to build. Too bad he was about to throw it away. He turned to Mandalay. Excuse me. I was wondering, where's Kota? I thought he could join us in the test of courage. If he wants to, and if you're okay with it, that is. Mandalay looked taken aback by the query, but her puzzlement was soon forgotten in favor of a pensive smile. That's a very nice idea, but I have a good feeling he'd refuse if you asked. Just asking couldn't hurt, right? Izuku contended. There's still time before my turn comes up. If I says no, I'll just go alone. The pro drummed a finger against her chin. She tapped it once, twice. Well. She flashed her teeth before she used the very same hand to ruffle his green curls, turning them even wilder than they already were. She laughed. Guess you're right. You can ask Ragdoll for his location. That kid has a special knack for disappearing. It's a good thing we have her quirk or I'd have to put a leash on him. Don't worry, I got it, Izuku reassured, already jogging in place. I have a good idea of where he is already. I won't be long. Looks like my intuition was right. Kota started, though he quickly hid his consternation with a scowl. Ugh, you again. What do you want now? With years of practice, Izuku brushed the hostility off without so much as letting his smile falter. We're taking a break from training to do a test of courage. I was wondering if maybe you wanted to join us. He faltered halfway through his lines, but seeing as he'd already walked all the way up here, it'd be more awkward if he left without saying anything. Once again, he caught Kota by surprise. But instead of the glares or insults you'd come to expect, the young boy grabbed the brim of his cap and pulled it low, leaving his face shadowed and unreadable. Geez. You came all the way up here just to ask me that. More or less, Izuku confirmed. I haven't heard a no yet. There was the glare. Thought this could only be called half-hearted at best. It spoke of embarrassment over genuine anger. Ugh. Kota groaned. You're damn persistent. Even if I told you to leave, would you even listen? If you ask me to go, I'll go. But if you want to come with me. Fine, fine. I'm going. Kota folded his arms over his torso. Just don't tell me my stupid aunt put you up to this. I promise you. This stupid idea was all my own. The kid snorted. Feeling an odd sense of accomplishment, Izuku memorized the sound and filed it away as a win. He reached a hand out. Let's go. I promised your aunt I'd be back before our turn came. Kota scrunched his nose up. He inspected the offered appendage with suspicion. Izuku looked down. Ah. I reached my hand out without thinking. Now Kota probably thinks I'm patronizing him. Beaten, he fell back, dropping his arm slack by his side. Or, at least, that's what he would have done, were he not interrupted by an upheaval of noise and percussion as the world around him turned on its head. The cloud formed to blind his vision as stone crushed into sand. Gravel beat against his skin like drops of rain, and it was pure instinct that propelled Izuku to jump in front of Kota, to protect the smaller form with his own. In the next moment, they were flying. His back felt like it had been torn through with an excavator and they were flying. He couldn't even hear the soaring wind over the boy screaming in his ear. He didn't even feel the small hands digging into his broken ribs over the adrenaline that engulfed him like an old friend. Ignoring his body's pains of protest, he pulled Kota close and covered him with as much of himself as possible. He turned until his back was angled toward the ground. It was already a mess. One more impact wouldn't make a difference. He bounced when he landed, and he had to swallow the scream beating against his esophagus. He couldn't allow Kota to see any weakness. He couldn't allow the boy to hesitate when Izuku told him to run. The first thing he saw when he opened his eyes was the stars. He wasn't even aware he had closed them. It could have been when that first burst of dust assaulted them, or it could have been his own instinctual reaction to protect himself from the pain he knew was coming. It didn't matter. The stars were beautiful. Just as beautiful as they had been yesterday, shining bright like polished silver. He could make out a few constellations, but no matter how hard he tried he could not remember any of the names. He looked down. Lower. 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 It was on the cliff. Tall, and impossibly muscular. Behind the figure the cliff gaped open, a grand hole leading into darkness. Even from this distance, the bloodlust was unmistakable. It practically rolled off of him, reeking of death and cruelty. His teeth were showing, but to call it a smile felt like an insult. It was a twisted, wretched thing. The only joy behind it the thrill of pain he caused. It was evil. Kota. Izuku murmured. The figure in his arms chattered like a body naked in a blizzard. The older boy raised a trembling arm, stroking his fingers over the other's back in silent reassurance. Run. Kota. Izuku's bloodied shirt grew even wetter as Kota shook his head furiously, rubbing snot and tears into his shoulder. No way. It's too late. Too late. Kota. Using what strength he still possessed, Izuku pushed at the smaller form. Kota clung valiantly to him, but eventually conceded and let himself be forced up onto his feet. Izuku heard a whoosh of air and a thump, and he knew time was running short. He looked up. The villain grinned at them just a few feet away. He arched his back, standing long and proud, like his very existence required celebration. His arms stretched out by his sides as if to embrace, but there was no mistaking the gesture for tenderness. Their eyes met. Izuku breathed. In. Out. He stopped. He allowed himself a moment. The rest of the world washed away as he felt every inch of his body. Every stab of pain, every creaking bone, every twitching muscle. He tried to assess the damage. He had to know how much time was left. It won't be long. Cracked ribs dug into his lungs, gouging into the organs further for each struggling breath he forced himself through. He coughed up the blood that poured into the many holes in his punctured respiratory system. He knew it was a losing battle, but that wasn't his concern. Izuku just wanted a few more seconds, a few more moments, before the reset. Izuku pushed against Kota's legs, urging him. Kota, he repeated for a fourth time. His voice was as loud as he could make it, yet it was hardly even above a whisper. He swallowed, trying to look as composed as he could given the situation. You don't have to be scared. Alright. Alright. The boy screeched, big fat tears rolling down his cheeks, as he slowly started to back away from the villain's approaching form. I'm not gonna be alright. Don't lie to me. He killed you. You're already dead, don't you get it? I know. Kota stumbled to a momentary stop. He looked unbelieving at the almost tranquil look on the teenager's face. Izuku forced their eyes to lock, gaze steady and unbreakable. He smiled. I know there's no way I'll survive this. But you don't have to worry. Do you want to know why? The villain had stopped as well. Izuku could feel his attention on him. If he turned his face, he would see the man's artificial eye narrow in suspicion and mouth twist downward in displeasure. But he didn't. Instead, he ignored the stranger completely. The only thing of importance was the distraught child mourning in front of him. It's a secret, but I'll tell you, Izuku spoke slowly, each word a battle. But he pressed on, no minding how draining or painful it was. It's because I'll be back, and then none of this will have ever happened. And it's going to happen again. And again. And again. As many times as it takes, until the only ones left standing are the two of us, together. Finally, he turned to look at the villain. He grinned. You lost the moment you met me. Kota dropped to his knees, sobbing. He twisted his hand into his shirt just above his heart, pulling at the fabric and throwing his head from side to side in repudiation. The villain's face coiled with fury. You brat. Izuku dropped his smile. He bore into the man. When he spoke, there was no enjoyment, no hatred, no anguish. Only caustic repose. I know you don't believe me. Neither of you do. You must think I'm deluded, or that I've lost my mind. But that's alright. You don't have to believe me. He felt along the cuts and bruises over his body, running into every dip and over every bump. It stung. Whether you believe me or not, none of that matter. It won't make what I'm saying any less true. And there's nothing. Not you, not me. That can stop it. His voice broke and he hacked out a phlegm of blood and spit. It's about to happen. He could speak no more as his throat seized in a violent fit of barks and coughs. Breathing became impossible as every gasp for air just filled his lungs with more and more blood. It wasn't a pleasant way to go, but it wasn't the worst. Before he died, he looked at the villain one more time. His face looked strange, forced into an expression that was surely unfamiliar to him. It was doubt, in the way his muscles relaxed and went slack. And it was fear, in how his pupils shrunk and mouth opened just a fraction. But it was just that. He was still confident, assured of his victory. He didn't believe the last words of the broken boy in front of him. But you didn't need to believe to be afraid. Izuku didn't believe in death. But death was terrifying. And like a lover's familiar embrace, the pain ebbed away and time turned on its axis. For once, there wasn't any shame or guilt in Izuku's heart. For he had already won without anyone ever realizing it. Because that man never laid one finger on Izumi Kota. Kota, Izuku pulled his hand back abruptly. We need to leave. Kota gave him a confused glare. Why? Call it a hero's intuition, the student forced out between clenched teeth, grabbing the younger by the nape of his shirt and pulling him bumbling into his legs. Kota let out a high-pitched yelp, quick to struggle against the diamond grip. Something bad is about to happen. Kota drummed his small fists into his side. Let me go, stupid. Izuku ignored the kid's struggles. He heard the explosion before he saw it, and didn't bother to turn his head back to look before he dove over the cliff's edge. Despite what happened last time, he still lacked a proper plan for what his next step should be, only thinking as far as getting the fuck away from this murderous asshole. He hadn't a clue of how he was going to nail this landing without breaking something or worse, but he had plenty of tries to work with. Right now, his number one priority was finding out what the fuck this guy's deal was. Mid-air, he angled his head to scowl at the very miff-looking villain left behind in the dust. Guess the man didn't expect his victims to make such a quick escape. Izuku narrowed his eyes, cradling a now very terrified child close to his chest. What's happening? Kota cried, clawing at Izuku's arms before clamping down on them like his life depended on it, which it very well might. Izuku dismissed that thought. It's a villain, Izuku provided, perhaps superfluous. I don't know how he knew we were here or what he wants, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't. No. Because either way, I'm gonna win. Maybe it was the confidence in his words. Maybe it was shock. But despite the clear skepticism Kota displayed when he looked at him, his grasp lessened minutely. Oh? Okay. The whisper was almost lost to the wind's wail, but to Izuku, those words were more important than anything else. It was a small victory in a mountain of bullshit, and that meant everything when you had nothing else. Ignoring the villain behind him, Izuku considered his next steps. The forest. Trees. Clipped phrases moved straight to the point, filtering out anything deemed inconsequential. Use them to break your fall. Setting his course for a thicket of leaves and branches wasn't the easiest thing when free-falling through the air with a terrified child in his arms, but Izuku had worked with worse odds. Momentarily, he shifted his arms to free up one limb, while still holding Kota tight with the other. The young boy crushed his face into his protector's shoulder, bunching up the fabric of Izuku's dark green tee, and pulling on it to the point of breaking to keep from screaming. The other gave him what he hoped was a comforting squeeze, before using his free hand, and aimed it behind him before flicking his fingers. With a bit of one for all, the air pressure pushed them closer to the emerald crown, and he moved his feet in front of him to take on the brunt of the damage. He returned his one-armed grip of Kota into two, hugging him close to give him the fullest protection he could, and slammed into the vegetation with a grunt. Branches broke their descent, scratching his arms into a spiderweb of maroon, but otherwise leaving him relatively unarmed, excluding a few bumps and bruises. Rather this than a hole through my back. He gingerly unfurled from his protective stance, dropping his charge by his feet and taking a step back. What are you doing? Kota still held his shirt hostage in a death grip. Don't leave me. Of course I'm not leaving you, Izuku frowned. He'd almost be offended by the notion if the child didn't look so scared. I'm just gonna take care of the problem while you stay here. Okay. No? The kid tugged on the fabric. His voice cracked with dismayed ire. You're gonna take care of it. You're not even a real hero. You're just a wannabe. What do you think you can do? Don't leave me. Kota. The boy flinched back with force. His hat had fallen off at some point during their tumble, so his hand grasped at nothing when it moved up to pull at the brim in reflex. He settled for covering his face with his palm, blocking off Izuku and resolutely refusing to face him. Izuku sighed. I get it. I'm supposed to grab you and run and tell the pros what's happening here and let them deal with it. Right. That's what you're thinking, isn't it? Kota didn't answer, but his silence spoke enough. It's fine to think that. You're not wrong. That is what one would normally do. It's what you should do. But I won't, and I'm gonna tell you why. I know what's going to happen. And I'll tell you. The child had removed his hand and was looking at him now. His wavering gaze swam with uncertainty, but there was a spark of hope too. Or the wish for hope at least. If I run now, people will get hurt. It's inevitable. And if there's a way for me to stop it and I throw that chance away. That's what you'd call evil, isn't it? But don't worry. I meant what I said before. I'm going to win. Something buzzed behind him. A sonorous cackling laugh, like a mix between a swarm of bees and yapping wolves, pulled straight from the god and cutting the atmosphere with its mockery. Ooh, looks like we've got a brave one. That's great. Great. You know, making shitty brats like you cry for mommy, just as you finish your awe-inspiring speech is my favorite. Fucking hilarious. Especially when I get to watch the people who believed in you realize that all your gallant posturing was just a load of bullshit. The man expelled another raucous round of laughter, like he just said something profoundly clever. Izuku whirled around with a sneer. Putting his canines on display, he flexed his fists and snarled. The only bullshit posturing I see here is you. What, too afraid to pick on someone your own size? Is culling little kids the only time you get to feel brave? Ha! The man's smile was wiped away in an instant like a whip to the face. He quirked one bright blonde brow into an angry frown, the other missing completely, as it had been permanently erased by an old modeled scar that split his face in two. In the middle of the pink and damaged skin bulged an eye that looked much too glassy to be anything but artificial. It was surrounded by a framework of metal, serving functions Izuku could only theorize on. Wow. You sure got a mouth on you, don't ya? You pissant. Can't wait to hear your screams when I tear your fucking tongue out. Good luck with that, Izuku growled. But I think that's gonna be hard when I've broken all your limbs, you absolute piece of human refuse. The villain rumbled deep in his chest, an echo chamber of acrimony. He raised the trunk of an arm and Izuku squinted. Was he growing? Or was the dark just playing tricks on him? No, his arm was definitely getting bigger. Threads of crimson climbed the limb like snakes curled around prey to squeeze the life out of it. It almost looked like muscle fibers. The red was a meaty hue that reminded Izuku of too many past mistakes, climbing up the villain's side and growing his arm into sizes even larger than before. As if he wasn't already freakishly big, now he began to look like something out of an old-school monster movie. This must be his quirk then. Some type of muscle manipulation perhaps. Izuku would have to do a few tests before he could draw any proper conclusions. Oh, by the way, I just realized. You face. I know you. Izuku was taken aback at the villain's seemingly out-of-the-blue announcement. He burst into another cacophony of whooping amusement, slapping a knee and looking genuinely tickled. Like there was some inside joke only he understood. You? Do? Izuku couldn't help his wonder take the better of him. It was one of his best traits after all. Or worse, depending on who you asked. Curiosity killed the Deku, but who's counting? Oh yeah. The man's quirk wavered slightly from his merry fit, red strings retracting for a moment, but quickly returned to their previous state, as their user forced himself to calm down between bouts of stray chuckles. Ooh, I've heard all about you. Well, everything that man knows, that is. Shigaraki. Yeah, you know him. Man, he couldn't stop going on about all the things he would do once he finally got his hands on you. Not gonna lie, I've got a strong stomach, but that shit was disturbing. Funny, but disturbing. Actually, I'm not supposed to kill you. Mr. Hans wants the honor all to himself, yada yada. I don't really care about all that shit he rambled about. Sure, if I capture you semi-alive that'd be nice I guess, but I won't cry over spilled milk if things go sideways. Especially now that you've pissed me off. Fuck. I think I get what Shigaraki mean now. Maybe I'll just fucking kill you after all. Oh? Izuku nodded. Yeah. That makes sense. He looked pretty pissed after I broke his wrists back then. I'd be surprised if he didn't want to torture me to death after that. The villain's lips twitched. He looked vaguely amused by Izuku's casual delivery, but was still too annoyed to show it. He drew in a phlegm of saliva, spitting it out on the ground by his boots. Enough talk, he declared, contracting his quirk-enhanced arm. I've stared at your stupid face long enough. If I go another second without punching it, I will burst a vein. He didn't leave room for any witty retorts before catapulting himself toward the other. Izuku only had a split second to make his choice. Dodge, block or counter. If this was a regular fight, avoiding the blow entirely would be his first instinct. Despite the limited knowledge he possessed of his opponent, it was obvious that any defense he put up would be blown through effortlessly. Should he stand his ground and take it anyway? Would it teach him anything he didn't already know about the enemy's capabilities? It'd probably kill him, but... Izuku sucked in a sharp breath and pushed his feet back. The arm barely grazed him, yet he could still feel pain bloom by the point of impact. It was sure to leave bruises later assuming he lived that long, that is. Frantically, he searched for Kota. The boy hadn't moved an inch from where he left him, frozen to the spot and mouth ajar in a noise that never came. Don't just stand there. Izuku screamed at him, hoping to knock the boy out of his stupor. Go, hide. I'll take care of this guy, and then we'll both go find your aunt together. As the words left his mouth, Izuku's eyes widened with a sudden realization. Perhaps it was a bit too late for it to hit him now, and he'd probably been vaguely aware ever since the villain first blew a hole through him. But in his defense, he'd been too busy with more pressing thoughts to truly let the situation sink in until this very moment. Kota had at the very least reacted to his words, and was now floundering backwards with a still paralyzed expression, just barely catching himself on his hands, as he careened over a stubborn rock that ambushed his heel. Quickly, he rolled over and pushed himself back up, only looking over his shoulder once before distancing himself from the battlefield, and dashing into the shadows of the forest. Izuku could see him peeking out from behind some branches, and figured it would have to do. Knowing Kota was as safe as could be given the situation, he zeroed back in on the enemy. He glared at the man, exuding as much animosity as he could, and pointed an accusing fist his way. Hey, you're not alone here, are you? You mentioned Shigaraki before, so that must mean you're working for him. Is he here too? Who else did he send? Were his classmates already brawling for their lives while he was too busy dealing with this wannabe Hulk to help them? The villain Izuku really needed a name for him. Just calling him the villain was growing kind of tiresome. Scratched his face, running chipped nails over the mottled blushing flesh, covering the better part of his face. And why would I tell you any of that? You already told me he wants to capture and torture me. Besides, you're gonna kill me here anyways, so what's answering a few more questions? The man snorted, rubbing his chin. Yeah, okay, that's fair. No, big man ain't here, too lazy or too pussy I guess. Or he figured he got better things to do. I don't know the names of all the extras he sent, bunch of tools if you ask me. Especially that firefuck, but they do have some nice power. Probably busy slaughtering your friends as we speak. Toasty. He guffawed at his own joke, and Izuku stored away the new information for later. Fire quirk, huh? Don't think I've died that way yet. And, Izuku huffed. It was worth a shot. What's your quirk anyway? It looked like you were manipulating your muscle fibers before. Is that right? The man blinked. Yeah, pretty much. To accentuate his words, he flashed his quirk until both arms were covered in ropes of bulging and pulsating masses of flesh, looking like disgusting tumors. Pretty neat, huh? Perfect for pulverizing anyone that gets in my way. Like snotty green-haired brats, for example. Don't doubt it, Izuku murmured. He called upon the power of One for All, and felt the familiar energy heat up his muscles. There was just one more thing. By the way, what's your name? The Tower of a Man paused for a moment, studying him with mismatched eyes. He clicked his tongue. You know, most times, the villain will usually introduce himself before anyone even asks the question. And if they don't, the police are usually the ones left to find out the answer. Yeah? Are you going somewhere with this? No? Just thought it was funny. Figures a weird kid like you would be the one to break tradition. It's muscular, kid. Though I don't think you'll need to remember it for long. This time, Izuku was the first to move. He went for a straightforward punch, imploring that his speed be enough to throw the other off and allow for an easy jab. Muscular stood his ground, raising both arms in a guard. Hitting him was like striking a brick wall, and when Izuku's knuckles struck its target, he cried out as he felt his bones crack and grind against each other into twisted angles from the pressure. He retreated, slightly dazed and jarred by how absolutely ineffective his attack had been. Muscular hadn't budged an inch, and his arms looked none the worse for wear. He reached out to grab him, but Izuku dashed to safety before the ominous fist could close around him. He pulled his swollen fingers to his chest, cradling them delicately. That had been 13%, the highest output he could manage before breaking his body apart like an overripe melon. Shit, what should I try next? 20. Or should I just go all in? This would have been less of a dilemma if there wasn't more villains for Izuku to deal with after this one. Cracking a few bones was a given, but he couldn't break himself down too early. He's only been using his arms thus far. What about the rest of his body? Using his already broken hand, Izuku used another 13% and shot for Muscular's legs. The man didn't even bother to avoid it, telling Izuku that this was a futile endeavor before he even got to the results. His suspicions were confirmed when his bruised knuckles smacked into what was previously regular skin, now pulsating with crimson threads. I can control all the muscle fibers in my body as I'd like. If that puny punt is the best you've got, then this is gonna be even easier than I thought. Izuku only had enough time to slur a curse before Muscular grabbed him by the back of his shirt and rammed a knee into his ribcage. He gasped as all air was crushed from his lungs. His body refused to cooperate when he tried to pull new oxygen into his body, sending him into an abrupt delirious panic. He felt heady as he slumped bonelessly to the ground as Muscular released his hold. For a moment, all rational thoughts escaped him, and he forgot what he was doing, until a frenzied wail was kind enough to put him back on track. Deku. Izuku shoved himself onto all fours and jumped back into a fighting stance, even as his ribs protested against him. He was pretty sure they were busted again, no surprise there. His lungs had at least quit their seizing, and he could gulp in some much-needed fresh air, which cleared up some of the fog in his head. Muscular crossed his arms, leering at him with a nasty smirk. I'll give it to you, kid. You've got some quick recovery time. Most people would be busy rolling on the floor by now. Izuku coughed, but didn't respond. His body felt sluggish after his abuse, and he tried his best to rearrange his thoughts in order, so that he could hopefully form some sort of plan. It proved to be a challenge when he still felt on the verge to throw up his dinner, and his eyeballs threatened to escape his skull from the veins throbbing hard behind them. The 13 isn't enough. I'll just have to up the ante. He jumped. With an animalistic war cry, he smashed into Muscular's shoulder at 30%. He was still using his pulverized fist, figuring he might as well put it through his paces, until he was physically incapable of doing any more. The man tensed as the hand plowed into him, but remained rooted to his place. He still had his arms crossed, content to watch Izuku's seemingly futile struggle to put a dent in him. The student reeled back, and before gravity put him back on the ground, he smashed his loosely clenched fist into the same spot once, twice, increasing his power by 10% for each hit. Finally, he dropped to his feet and glared down at his hand with a look of betrayal. It was hardly held together by this point, just a pulp of sinew and muscle and powdered bone. He switched arms, using a 60% smash, and aimed it for Muscular's face. The villain quickly uncrossed his arms and pulled them up to ward off the blow, one for all bouncing off it like rain on plastic. Following in the theme of everything else Izuku had done up to this point, he only managed to hurt himself more than he hurt the villain. Yet, his opponent's seemingly ordinary action gave him pause. He put a few meters distance between himself and the enemy, dropping his massacred hands to his hips. Why did you block me? Muscular pressed his lips into a tight line. Is there something I could have actually hurt if I hit your face? Izuku made a move to bring his fingers up to cup his chin, but winced when he was painfully reminded of the exercise he put them through. He aborted the action, but that didn't stop him from falling into one of his patented mumbled tirades. Is it possible that your quirk doesn't extend to your face? No, you said earlier that you can control all the muscles in your body. So if that's not it, then it must mean you talk too much. It was the last thing Izuku heard before an arm tore through his sternum. He blinked. He was vaguely aware of Kota screaming his name in the background, and he watched uncomprehending as his guts spilled to his feet. Oh, he thought with a wet cough, just before the reset took hold of him. I think I get it now. Don't leave me. If he had to rate his landing technique, he'd give himself a 7 out of 10. Could use some work, but pretty decent all thing considered. He patted Koda's head with a hum. Go and wait behind that tree over there, please. I'll be back soon. What? Koda gaped at him. His pupils narrowed to pricks, and he glowered with something akin to betrayal. No, don't you dare. Don't worry. I've got a pretty good idea of how to deal with this guy. I think. You think? 80% sure. Quit your blabbering and face me, you brats. Izuku cocked his head. He scowled at Muscular, who stood flexing his biceps behind the duo. Izuku pushed gently on Koda's shoulder. Come on, he urged, casting a beseeching look the other's way. I promise I'll be back for you. Koda's lower lip trembled. He looked like he wanted to interject, but when he glanced over to the posturing villain, a heart-stricken expression jumped his face. His hat had survived the fall this time, so he pulled it over his eyes before leaving with hurried steps to hide behind the trunk of the closest tree, as per Izuku's instruction. The teen turned to his adversary. He took a moment to consider his options. With a pull of his mouth and a shrug, he went ahead and asked what had been on his mind since the last reset. I'll fight you, but before that, what can you tell me about the other villains that came here with you? Muscular tilted his head. Them? I don't really give a shit about them, so I can't tell you much. Not that it would help anyways, since they'll all be dead soon, yeah. But come on. There must be something you can tell me about them. How many are there? What are their quirks? Muscular made a strange face at the string of questions. It was something like a pout while simultaneously showing of his clenched teeth. He looked like he was itching to punch something, but evidently liked the sound of his own voice enough to humor his would-be victim. What is this, an interview? But fine, I'll play along. Not counting me, 7. No, wait, 8. Maybe 9. Izuku kept a frustrated sigh at bay. He waited for Muscular to continue digging his party's own grave. There's the crazy bitch not sure what her deal is, or her quirk for that matter, and then there's the firefuck. Asshole think he's cosplaying a scarecrow or something. There's also the Ninja Turtle wannaband. Ugh, the man shook his head. He creased a thin ash blonde eyebrow. I changed my mind. This is boring. Why the fuck am I answering some little punk's questions when I could just pound him to dust instead? Izuku whitened his stance but kept his arms by his sides. Because you're such a nice, upstanding citizen. Muscular raised a brow. Apparently, he didn't see fit to deign Izuku's banter with a response, settling for a silent scowl. The bushy-haired boy bit into his cheek. He raised his guard. Well, let's see if you could answer one more question for me. He jumped. With a horizontal launch, he raised fists first toward the man like some two-bit amateur. Or like a student with no prior fighting experience. Muscular grinned, raising his pulsating red-threaded arms in front of him. Just before the moment of impact, Izuku unclenched his fingers and switched from the perfectly televised punch to a grapple. He curled the digits around a bulging wrist, so thick his thumb didn't even touch the tips of the rest of his fingers. Muscular's face changed from already assured victory to surprise, as Izuku used his secure hold to swing his legs up like some kind of circus act, the tips of his feet aimed for a single-minded goal. Muscular turned his head just in time before a one-for-all infused kick smacked into his temporal bone. Izuku scared, but his effort weren't for nothing as he heard a deep howl leave the villain. The hero to be's target had been the man's artificial eye, and while most of his foot missed the mark due to his enemy's sharp maneuvering, his heel still managed to jostle its position in its socket. Apparently, the sensation was less than pleasant. It's like I thought, Izuku disclosed his observation aloud as he dropped to the floor. Any place that doesn't have muscles is completely vulnerable. Muscular burst an unholy screech, jumping for Izuku's throat, looking ready to snap his throat like a candy bar. Izuku flicked the air next to himself, sending him tumbling to the side with a little too much force. Oof, he complained as he rolled over the ground. A few stray rocks dug into and stuck to his cheek. You're also easy to rile up. You little fuck. Muscular roared, mouth practically frothing as he whirled to face the teen. I'm gonna make you pay for that, you cocksucker. Like an angry bull seeing red, he charged for Izuku, screaming the whole way. His quirk practically tore his body apart, and Izuku had to admit the sight was kinda goddamn terrifying. Still, he couldn't let fear's chill take hold of him, and was quickly back on his feet, ready to jump out of the stampeding villain's path. The sequence reminded him of a boss fight in a video game, where the player had to dodge attacks with perfectly timed button mashes, and watch as the enemy, either blinded by rage or too dumb to stop, smacked into a pillar or wall to be stunned just long enough for the hero to make a move. Though Izuku doubted things would work so conveniently in real life, sadly. It really was unfortunate that Muscular caught onto Izuku's plan too quickly, the teen thought as he bounded out of the way of the lunging behemoth. Now the man was sure to be on even higher alert than earlier, and Izuku doubted he'd get another crack at the madly spinning mechanical eye anytime soon. At least he'd proven his theory true, so even if he died here, it wouldn't be a complete waste. Now, he only needed to figure out how to best utilize that information. He cupped a handful of dirt, throwing it in the villain's face. Muscular shielded himself with an arm, and Izuku used a brief moment of blindness to rush toward the man, before dropping low to slide across the ground. The friction tore a path through the dirt, and his clothes ripped along with his skin. Fresh wounds burned unpleasantly as earth got into the lacerations, but Izuku brushed it off with practiced ease. He leapt straight up like a jackrabbit once he crossed under the boundary of Muscular's guarding limb, almost touching noses with the other, as they stared face to face for the briefest of moments. Izuku was about to tear the man's prosthetic eye out, but from the corner of his eye, he saw his opponent's free arm put in motion. With the realization that he wouldn't be fast enough, he settled for his next best choice, and slammed his forehead into the facade as hard as he could. Muscular was stunned as another tide of pain pulsed through him, and he wobbled slightly. Any of his previous plans of action was put on hold as he recuperated, and Izuku used the moment to complete his own aim. He latched himself around Muscular's torso using his knees, before thrusting his palms out and scratched at the other's face with violent vigor. Jesus Christ. Muscular swore, swatting at Izuku's abdomen like a fly, pushing the teenager off and sending him crashing into the ground. Izuku wheezed, but that was all. No blood or gore. The agony he inflicted on the other must have been intense enough that Muscular was unable to muster up his full strength to smack Izuku around like a pinata. Enough of this. The man roared. He flexed his body, muscles growing to sizes previously unseen. Now Izuku thought this really must be some type of video game, with Muscular entering his second phase. If this is a video game, I really hope there's some sort of cheat code, Izuku grimaced. I'm tired of running around with one life but infinite retries. Muscular ran at him with outstretched arms and a wild snarl. Izuku readied his stance. Seconds before clashing, the big man changed his course and ran past the teen, jumping into the thicket of trees behind him. Izuku's eyes widened, and with blind panic and righteous furor, he erupted with a scream and sprung up on the villain's back, with a one-for-all 8 pounds. Don't you dare touch him. He howled, pulling Muscular into a chokehold, not even considering the futility of the action. All he knew was that the man needed to hurt him enough that he'd never again consider touching a hair of. Muscular jumped. He pulled at Izuku's wrists into a bone-breaking hold, before tilting his body backward midair. The teen could only gape as he realized his opponent's intention. He wondered if it was all planned since the moment the man changed his focus from Izuku to Kota. What the fuck? If it was possible to crack a person's bones all at once like a hazelnut on Christmas, then Muscular figured it out. At least the shock was great enough that Izuku hardly even felt it when the villain suplexed his body into the ground. He crushed the student with the flat of his back into the earth, filling the air with the sound of a multitude of foreboding pops and snaps that Izuku could only begin to guess the origin of. All things considered, it wasn't the worst way to go. Stay here and don't come out until I tell you to, alright. Izuku shoved the horn cap over Kota's head, and turned to face his opponent for the 4th time. His last mistake was being goaded into doing what Muscular had expected him to do. Well, if the man wanted to play mind games, then so could he. Hello Muscular, he called out, mouth drawn and sporting a severe glare. The aforementioned man looked momentarily surprised by the call of his name, but was quick to shrug it off. Heh, you recognize me? I guess I did make some pretty big waves back when I killed those heroes. Izuku paused. No, he was not aware that this villain had killed heroes before. While the fanboy had the ability to name more or less every hero under the sun, no matter how minor, he rarely took the time to memorize villains. Not until recently, that is. Muscular looked much too proud of himself. He wore a self-satisfied smirk that showed off all his teeth, curling up the corners of his disproportionate eyes. A hollow feeling settled in Izuku's chest, before it was replaced by burning fire. Not allowing Muscular the chance to put him off his game, he stalked up to his opponent with an even gait. Right, he bit out, unwilling to give Muscular any more gratification than he could help. Well, maybe you recognize me too. Midoriya Izuku. Ring any bells? Muscular scratched his shaggy ash-colored hair, pursing his lips with contemplation as he stared the teenager down. Impatient, Izuku provided the man with another hint. Come on. I'm sure Shigaraki mentioned me to you. Probably something about how he would torture me to death. I mean, I did make some pretty big waves back when I broke both his wrists. Muscular's eyes lit up with recognition. Good. He never said anything about knowing Izuku last time, but that was likely thanks to him being too angry to pay enough attention to his challenger's face. The man grinned. Oh yeah, he bellowed out a laugh. Now I remember. Midoriya Izuku, that's right. Shigaraki. He halted in the middle of his dialogue, sadistic delight altering into perplexity. He made a face, studying Izuku with a suspicious glare. Hold on. Why the hell are you assuming I know who Shigaraki is? Do you think all us villains like to gather for shindigs on the weekends or something? Izuku titled his head innocently. You don't. Then what do you do on the weekend? Steal candy from little babies. Haha. Very funny. Muscular audibly ground his teeth together. Belying his words, he looked far from amused. You've got some inside information I was not aware of, or did you just make a lucky guess? Izuku smiled. Wouldn't you like to know? Muscular growled, clearly agitated at the non-answer. He covered both arms in reinforced muscle fiber, and looked ready to grind the puny little student in front of him into minced meat. Izuku thought back to what happened last time, musing to himself. If I could only get his eye, I could severely handicap him. But even with one for all, this guy's reflexes are crazy fast. As soon as I aim for his face, he'll know what's up. They circled each other like two boxers ready to square off in the ring. Izuku continued to run down his options. I know what I said about Shigaraki tripped him up, but it won't be enough on its own to gain the upper hand. Come on, think, his eyes can't be the only weak spot. His eyes lit up with an old memory. Koch-chan's and his own mother had set up a game night and forced the two boys to attend. Not that Izuku could ever say no to his mom. They had been about 10 by then, and they had settled for a trivia board game after much discussion. It was geared toward a slightly older audience than the children had been, but they didn't have many options to pick from. Koch-chan carried a sour expression with him most of the night, while Izuku tried his best to act normal in front of the two mothers. They were still under the impression that the two boys were best of friends, which, in a way, they were. Just not the way Izuku wanted them to be. Alright Izuku, it's your turn. He eyed the fists clenched by Muscular's hips. Hey Katsuki. Give me the damn card, you brat. Hey Muscular. You wanna know a fun fact? Okay, let's see. The question is. He kicked the tip of his boots into the ground, using his quirk to punt a mound of dirt in Muscular's direction. The man took a step back, raising a hand to slap the offending muck away. With one leg still raised in the air, Izuku performed a one-legged jump and pirouetted through the air almost gracefully, albeit unintentionally. He latched onto his opponent's hovering limb, clinging on tight with the inner side of his elbow with one arm, while the other traveled up to slot his fingers in between Muscular's, palm to palm. How many muscles does your fingers have? Izuku hoisted himself up along the limb with his legs, until he was eye to eye with the villain himself. All the muscles controlling your fingers exist in your palm and arm. The rest is just tendons. He flexed his hand. And he pushed. Pop. Muscular roared as several cracks resounded from his twisted digits. Izuku pushed off with his soles against the other's abs to soar to safety, before his opponent had a moment to counteract. You absolute fucker. The blond man grit his teeth, and Izuku could tell the villain did his damnedest to endure the pain he'd just been subjected to. One hand down, Izuku counted. Another to go. It wasn't particularly hard to incapacitate Muscular's other fingers. Izuku had expected his enemy to put up more resistance, but it seemed like the man didn't have the greatest tolerance for pain. He probably wasn't used to actually taking damage, so when he did, his instincts went into overdrive. With a primitive and uncontrollable anger, Muscular flung his remaining fist around without much thought of where it went. He did manage to knock it into Izuku's jaw hard enough to leave an impressive bruise for later, but no bones were broken, no joints dislocated and no teeth lost. It was easy to capture the fist and pull the fingers back until they touched the back of Muscular's hand with the accompanying series of snaps. All in all, Izuku felt pretty good. Deeming Muscular sufficiently handicapped, it was time to carry out what would hopefully be the last step of his plan. Gouging his fingers in between the metal frame of Muscular's artificial eye and his socket was a lot easier when the villain's means of fighting back had been cut down a few notches. He could still swing his arms and legs around, sure. He even tried his damnedest to bite at Izuku whenever the boy got too close to the other's eager teeth, but it was a lot easier to avoid attacks when his perpetrator couldn't hold him down without hugging him with both arms. That's not to say it was a walk in the park. Aside from his jaw, Izuku sustained a few more bumps and tender spots as he was jostled around attempting to climb the villain like a monkey in a tree. He went up Muscular's back to avoid the hug of death, not too worried about being body slammed like last time. The man could try, but it would be easy for the teen to jump off to safety, and Muscular would only find himself in a new vulnerable position, lying supine on the floor with Izuku unharmed above him. The man opted for shaking his body around like a wet dog to throw him off instead, but Izuku held firm. He snaked his fingers over Muscular's scar, and dug the tips in between folds of skin. The man swore at him. He kicked his feet up behind him, and Izuku grunted as they smacked into his calves, but he refused to let go. Realizing his tactic wasn't working, Muscular pulled his arms behind himself in an attempt to crush the boy against his back using his flexor muscles. Izuku locked his elbows around his enemy's neck and lifted his lower body into the air to avoid the assault. His stomach, back, arms and legs all tends to be hard as steel with the effort. Thank God for all might strength training. Stop struggling. Izuku growled in frustration. Just fucking let me do this already. Still suspended in the air, he didn't trust Muscular's arms under him. He pushed the digits of his right hand up to crawl along the villain's face. The left he used to grab onto a stark red shoulder, the fold of his arm locked around the man's neck. Finally reaching his goal, Izuku infused his fingers with one for all, before plunging them as deep into the socket as they could go. He grabbed a hold of as much as he could and then, he pulled. Muscular let out an ungodly shriek as whatever used to occupy his skull dropped down on the dirt floor, with a soft clatter of gears and screws and glass. He gave an unusually strong twist of his shoulder, and Izuku's grip slipped. He fell, bouncing back a few meters on his toes. Muscular brought a mess of a hand up to cup against the gaping hole in his head. Izuku absent-mindedly rubbed his fingers against one another, stinging slightly from the metal previously digging into them. He felt something wet. He looked down and saw his hand covered in blood. From the sheer amount of it, and the lack of visible cuts, he knew it didn't belong to him for once. Muscular turned stumbled, more like half-blind to face the student that just messed his face up worse than it already was. Izuku could see a river of red press out from under the palm pushed up against the villain's ugly scar. It was an alarming volume of blood, but Muscular still remained standing, looking more pissed than anything Izuku had ever seen. Maybe even more pissed than Shigaraki after having his wrists broken. You? Muscular opened his mouth. He gaped like an open bag of chips for a moment, making gasping and gargled noises, as he tried to come up with his best threat or insult. Probably both. He looked lost. You took my eye. You crazy fucking psycho. My goddamn eye. You piece of coon guzzling shit pile. I'll kill you. I'll fucking kill you, you worthless, good for nothing, masquerade of a hero. Izuku grimaced. I'm the psycho. You're the one trying to kill a little kid. And you're calling me the psycho. The hypocrisy pissed Izuku off more than the insults themselves. You're just a wannabe. Muscular repeated, voice shrill with glee. He grinned, but struggled to secure it. I fought a bunch of heroes before you. Killed some too. And you better believe I enjoyed it. So sure, I'm a psychopath, but at least I never pretended to be something I ain't. You're just a hack. All that pretend virtue, it's enough to make me sick. He took a step forward. He paused as his knee buckled, but he remained standing. You think I'm a hypocrite. But the truth is, the only real hypocrite here is you. Shut up, Izuku tensed his muscles. The hard and jagged edge of a rock he picked off the ground cut into his palm. Don't pretend like you know anything about me. I'm just doing what's necessary. Oh yeah? Muscular removed the hand from his head. The chasm of his empty sock gaped raw and meaty as it was unveiled for the world to see. Izuku stared at it. Could hardly look away. His breath hitched. Is it necessary for you to enjoy it too? The stone sailed through the air, almost breaking apart from the force of Izuku's quirk. It sliced an arc through the sky with hissing turbulence, before plunging into its target. Muscular didn't scream this time. His other eye was decimated as soon as the rock touched it, and it exploded with clear fluid splashing over the man's skin and the space in front of him. He fell onto his back with a heavy thump. Fuck. He rasped, quiet as a breath. His anger from earlier must have scurried off somewhere, and it put Izuku on edge more than anything else. Guess. You're strong after all, huh? Damn. I'll give you credit for that. You're a fighter. A sneaky, slippery pest, but you beat me fair and square. He tried to sit up, but fell back unceremoniously after less than a second of trying. He hissed as his broken fingers dragged across the uneven ground. His face was painted red from the 2 yawning holes in his head. Motherfucker. When I recover from this and run into you again, I'll kill you for sure. I'll definitely kill you. He coughed wetly, before falling silent. Izuku watched the man's torso slowly raise and lower as he inhaled and exhaled with tired, wheezing breaths. His body had returned to its normal form, and he looked unusually pale in the silver spotlight of the moon. Soft steps pattered up next to Izuku, and the teen glanced to his source. Is it over? Kota whispered, tugging on Izuku's sore wrist. He sidled up behind Izuku's back and peeked out at the marred villain, lips trembling. Izuku looked too muscular. He was far from a pretty sight. The teen felt a pang of remorse. Kota was far too young to see something like this. I don't think he'll be getting up anytime soon, he confirmed, looping his arm around Kota and pulling him against his torso in a half embrace. He muttered under his breath, he better not after all the problems he caused. Or I won't be so soft. What do we do now? Kota stared up at Izuku with askance. The student hummed in consideration. I should get you to a pro. They can do a better job at keeping you safe than I can. Izuku released Kota and crouched down in front of him. Hop on my back. We can travel faster this way. Izuku formed his arms into loops for Kota to thread his legs through. The kid jumped up and crossed his arms over the other's neck for support. You better not drop me, he grumbled, tightening his hold as far as he could without strangling his ride. Once Kota was settled, Izuku ran. He set his destination for the lodge, figuring he should at least be able to find one teacher there. His muscles smarted from strain and littered bruises, and the child clinging to him didn't help as he unintentionally pressed into Izuku's sore spots. Still, it was a minor enough discomfort that ignoring it was easy, especially with the residue adrenaline still pumping through his veins. He zigzagged through the brush, keeping an eagle-eyed vision out for any movement. His dry eyes made him wish he had a pair of goggles like Aizawa. He reminded himself to ask support for that addition to his costume when he had the chance. Deku. Kota yelled in his ear, pointing a short finger to a spot of darkness. Over there. Izuku rested on his heels and dug them into the soil, sending up a small dust of cloud behind him, as the friction broke his advance. He pulled to a full stop with a small tumble, following Kota's direction with a sinking feeling. Is that? Kota hugged his back closer. The boy didn't dare finish the sentence, and could only stare wide-eyed at the 2 charcoal forms burned into the ground. His expression wilted and he sobbed. This can't be happening. None of this is happening. Izuku's legs felt weak, and he had to slip Kota down his back, before he made them both fall over. Once the kid's feet hit the ground, Izuku ran up to the blackened shapes, praying to God that Kota was right. He kneeled down in the dirt, swathing his knees with a layer of soot. He held out a hand, cupping it over one of the coal silhouettes. The dry material crumbled at the touch, and his stomach churned. The bodies were completely unrecognizable, burned so badly he could only discern the vague shapes of something that used to be human. When did this happen? Izuku swallowed down a gag. Can I still stop it? Deku. Watch out. Izuku didn't have time to act before he was screaming. Every inch of his skin blared with anguish, and he collapsed onto his stomach. Bright blue light filled his vision, turning him blind. He tried to close his eyes, but his eyelids were melted into his skull. He had no choice but to keep looking, and through the azure flames, he could make out the growing hazy shape of someone tall and lean. One arm was stretched out in Izuku's direction. The villain spoke. For a bunch of heroes to be, you don't put up much of a fight, do you? Izuku opened his mouth. He wanted to scream at the man, curse him to hell and back, but the only thing that escaped his barren throat was a raspy whine. He tried to stand, do anything, but his muscles refused to cooperate. His nose brimmed with the smell of burnt flesh and fabric. He would have thrown up if he could. The man was right in front of him now. Izuku's vision was blurry, and he could only make out splotches of washed-out color. He raked his eyes from the villain's boots to his indistinguishable face. He memorized it all. Firefuck. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.